Live from the back of Ruth the Realtor's car, it's the Stacking Deed Show. I'm Ruth's neighbor and part-time mechanic, neighbor Doug, broadcasting live from this extra spacious, luxurious trunk recording studio. How do you get started in real estate? You learn from people who've done it. Today, we'll feature one man who shares his story of buying 10 properties. Hines will tell us how to identify the best houses and how to choose the right financing and how to find the perfect tenants, all on your own without a property manager. And while you have a full-time job. That's a lot of ands. You'll get all the hacks on today's show. In our headlines, in many cities, rent prices are falling. What do you do if your unit is priced too high and your tenant can't keep up? On the flip side, how do you price your property so it rents fast without being underpriced? We'll share. Plus, we'll answer a call to Ruth's Rotary, and I'll amaze you with this week's Property Pop Quiz. And now, two people who occupy the property in the backseat of this town car. Here's Crystal Hammond and Joe Saul-Sehy.
Hey, welcome to today's show. Hi there, Joe. How are you, buddy?
Well, I'm great, but you, buddy, keep hogging all the back seat, buddy.
I apologize. I really mean that sincerely.
You got your new pronunciation?
Enunciation, yes.
Yeah.
I actually have a random weird question for you. Do you remember, this is totally unrelated, what was the first check you bounced?
The first check I bounced. Do you know how many checks back in the 90s I bounced? I bounced so many checks. And let me tell you this, I don't, because I did so many.
Oh, no.
Before I got my act together. But let me tell you this one instead. So I've already got my act together. I've become a really good financial planner, right? And I'm working with these high-powered engineers. He's an engineer that works with Ford to help the sound of the door sounds better when it closes. Like people will evaluate when they go to the car dealer, how the door sounds when it latches. Like if it latches really confidently, people will buy the car. And by the same token, he would also work with Callaway. And so when people would hit their golf club, they would make it so that it would make a sound. If you hit it well, it would make a sound that pinged more. They worked with Harley Davidson, not to make the motorcycle better, to make that spitting sound better. That's what this guy did. And his spouse worked for General Motors because I was in Detroit. So a lot of people, doing automotive stuff. Well, anyway, I take them to dinner and I didn't realize, number one, that I had forgotten my credit cards in the top of my desk. I bought something that day and I'd taken everything out. So my wallet is empty except my debit card. And I also didn't know my dad, who never bounces checks, by the way, my dad had just written me a check. And it had bounced because the dude who wrote him a check had bounced. And so he had no money in his account, wrote me a check. And if you ask my dad this question, I think this might be the only check my dad ever bounced. So I'm at dinner. We've had a great time. I open up my wallet. I'm this dude who's on TV twice a week. So I'm like, the guy in Detroit. And I'm with these high-powered people. And we're at this really nice restaurant and the bill comes and I casually look at my wallet. I'm like, oh, I don't have my credit cards with me. Oh yeah, I left them in my debt. Okay, well, I got my debit card here. No big deal. So I slapped that baby in. A friend of mine actually had an issue with his credit card and the waiter came over and was really cool. The waiter came over and goes, hey, excuse me, Mr. Sharp, looking at his credit card, goes, excuse me, Mr. Sharp, you've got a phone call back here.
Oh, nice. Discretion.
Yes, takes him back and goes, hey, your credit card didn't go through and I didn't want to embarrass you. This dude didn't do any of that.
Oh, no.
This dude comes out and goes, sir, that card didn't go through. I said, oh, there's got to be some mistake because I got plenty of money in my account. By the way, it was a big shit.
Oh, yeah.
So the dude goes, oh, no, I ran it 3 times.
Oh, no.
This isn't going to work. You need another form of payment. So I look at my clients.
Oh, no.
And they're looking at me like the biggest loser. And then the one client, the guy, says, hey, Joe, how about if we take you to dinner?
Oh, that was sweet.
And I'm like, great. And this is before Venmo, but I ended up writing them a check and I put that in the mail the next day. and
Old
I
school. You have to
pay
own the
for dinner.
check.
But yeah, how about there must be a reason why. And by the way, all of this has to do with real estate, even though you didn't think it did, Crystal.
Okay.
People are like, so what's it have to do with real estate? People, number one, make decisions about you immediately based on surface stuff. So we can't talk enough about how your rental property looks from the beginning. We're going to talk about getting tenants today, like how things look at the beginning, taking care. And then second, taking care of the little things. Like, you know, if I would have just put my credit card in my wallet, my dad would have bounced the check to me. It would have been no big deal. And we wouldn't have had that problem. But I feel like a lot of times we want to cut corners. We want to skip the little tiny things because we don't think they're important.
The routine. Yeah.
And your tenants can tell when you cut corners. You become hard to work with. Things start to spiral out of control. Take care of the little things. The big things take care of themselves. So I think there actually are a couple lessons there. But you must have asked me that question for a reason.
Oh, I was just randomly thinking of mine. It was a total situation different from yours, though. It was in college, Papa John's Pizza. We all fought over who was going to pay for the pizza.
And Crystal goes, I'll bounce mine.
And sure enough, I bounced my first check paying for Papa John's Pizza. Hey.
That's fantastic. You shouldn't talk about that because I'm starving right now.
Right.
But
same.
You know what I'm starving for? A great headline and a great guest. And you've got one today, Crystal.
Yes, I cannot wait for you guys to learn from Mr. Al Hines. He is actually a firefighter. So he's just like us. You know, he's a regular person. And he now has 10 rental properties. And he does this while being a firefighter. So I can't wait for you to learn from him, learn all of his tips, tricks, and how he found his own places, how he found his own tenants, and how he manages everything on his own. I feel like from that Michael Scott, Somehow I Manage, he manages all this stuff. Coming up first, we have our headline. So let's get to it.
Hello, chaps. And now our Stacking Deeds headlines. Cheerio and pip pip.
So, Joe, today's piece comes to us from The Week, and this is by Becca Stanek. And she's saying, when will America's rental prices come down? So renters are about to get some long-awaited relief. I know that they keep saying that there's a housing shortage, and existing renters are looking to renew their leases, but they also may get a leg up in the near future because the rate of rent increases upon renewal are starting to mellow out. So this could be a shift in bargaining power to tenants, but how does that help landlords?
Yeah, that's absolutely crystal bad news for landlords, right?
Right.
I mean, we see that, but let's be honest. The last couple of years, as landlords have tried to keep up with inflation and with the fact that they can get more and finally getting the pricing right for the communities that they're in, landlords should have had it. If you were doing things right, you should have had it pretty darn good.
So compared to a year ago, most sources still show that new lease asking rents going up a bit, but there's a downward shift in the rate at which rental prices are increasing, because they talk about how from May 2022 to May 2023, rents went up by less than 2%. And this time last year, there were double-digit increases in that rent. So when you combine May's gains with the previous months in 2023, the current year-to-date growth rate is 1.9%. So the rates are still growing, but not as fast as they were.
Yeah, this is kind of a 1-2 punch from what we talked about a week ago, Crystal, because we talked about the blow up potentially happening with Airbnbs. Mm-hmm. And now we have the same thing going on in rental markets. And yet, remember last week when we talked about there's so fewer properties that are for rent now than there were before? That means this could potentially be doubly as scary, because if we've got fewer properties and we're still not seeing rent prices going up quickly, that could be signaling a bigger slowdown. And by the way, whether it does or not, it just makes sense to me that we should plan for the worst and hope for the best. I see way too many landlords that plan for the best. All their numbers are optimistic. And I know that just as an engineer, when you're planning numbers, I got to believe you're always looking at worst case scenario, Crystal.
Well, and that's the thing too. A lot of landlords also raising. They're not really looking at why rents are starting to fall now. And then going back to this piece, they say many tenants have maxed out on how much of their income they can devote to rent,
Yep.
while like they've been layoffs and other things like that. So a lot of renters, potential renters, are finding that prices are kind of still out of reach for them.
Well, this is why data, I think, is your friend. If you look at the median income in Texarkana, where I live now, versus the northern suburbs of Detroit, where I used to live, you can charge a lot more and still be less than 30% of somebody's wallet share in Oakland County, Michigan, than you can in Bowie County, Texas. Bowie County, Texas, I think the median income's around $32,000.
Mhm.
In Oakland County, I would have to believe it's closer to 75,000. I should have looked that up. If I knew we were going here exactly, I would have, but I don't think I'm going to be off by that much on either one of those numbers. But look at that difference, Crystal.
Mhm.
You can command a much higher rent. Now, the bad news is you're going to pay a lot more for a house in Oakland County to buy it, to rent it out. So to cover your mortgage in Oakland County, Michigan is going to cost a lot more than it will to buy a house in Texarkana. You could buy a $100,000 house in Texarkana in a decent neighborhood, rehab it a little bit, and still do very well on less than 30% of a $32,000 income that people have to swallow. So looking up the data on government websites on what people make and knowing what the median income is, I think is a great place to start.
And that's why technology is our friend, because there's so many apps out there, there's so many tools out there where you can look
yeah.
up data like this. You can also use tools. I know we talked about a lot of tools on the show. Rentometer is one where you can even see, hey, what the rents are going for in Texarkana or in the other places that Joe just mentioned. And then you can see, hey, the asking price for a new home or a home to rent out is this. And now you can use all these tools to see, okay, what's the mortgage going to be on that, taxes, insurance, maintenance. And then you can also look at, okay, what are rents going for in that area? So that way you're not pricing yourself too low or too high.
That's a great point. I mean, I'm on the Rentometer website right now. It's spelled rentometer.com. And first of all, there's a trial for 7 days. Now, you do have to pay for this. And just in full disclosure, we are not affiliated with Rentometer in any way. We just know this is a tool that a lot of the pros use. We also know that this is a great way to get access to a lot of data. And for people that are small timers, the basic plan, $49 a year, it says the quick view gives you the average rent in the area, the median rent in the area, percentiles, 25th and 75th, a map view. So it kind of shows heat maps of which neighborhoods, sample sizes, sample radiuses. You can filter things by minimum and maximum price, minimum, maximum square footage, building types, that type of thing, analyzed by street addresses. I mean, there's so much that this tool goes. It certainly isn't the only tool out there, but I love your point, Crystal, that latching on to some of these tools can save you so much time. And I know that you're trying to put as much money into the house as possible. But let's be clear, if you can make a great buying decision at the beginning, if you just make a great buying decision at the beginning, you'll save yourself a lot of hassle later.
And that's where the most money is made. It's when you buy. So it's always when you buy. Well, not always, but
Yeah, no,
when you buy, you do that research.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if things truly are bad based on our headline last week and our headline this week. This is good news, by the way, for our deeders because of the fact that you've got your deeder community, you've got this show, you've got this knowledge that you see people that just go out there and think that real estate's the hot thing. They get beat up. In fact, it's funny, Crystal. We just got a review of the Stacking Benjamins show saying that Joe and OG say that buying rental houses can be dangerous. And yet they just launched a sister show called Stacking Deeds. So they're hypocrites. They're hypocritical. I'm like, no, the reason we launched this show is because it can be dangerous and because there are so many people that want to do this. You need data, you need information.
And you need stories.
You do need, yes, absolutely. You need to hear from people like Al, who we're going to hear from today, who have been there. But I think learning what some of these tools are and making sure that you invest a little bit in things like Rentometer, in Hemlane, in Steadily. If you invest in some of these great tools, it's going to make the job so much easier later. But I did want to ask this. If things really are getting bad, let's say things are tough, and your renter comes to you, Crystal, and says, I can't make the payment. First of all, have you had a tenant do that where they've come to you and said, I can't do it?
Well, I've had situations where I've had to come creative in figuring out solutions to different problems because when COVID hit and people couldn't pay rent, every landlord I feel like was shaking in their boots like,
Sure.
oh, hockey stick, whatever,
Yeah.
SHIT, how am I going to circumvent this? And so then you run to programs. So we had Grace on the show earlier, and she talked about programs. There are nonprofits out there are charities out there that will help you if they see, okay, this has been a good tenant, they've been paying their bills, they just have, a rough patch, a current rough patch. They will help you pay your bills. So it behooves you as a landlord and it behooves your tenant to get that help, or else you have to be realistic and say, okay, I have a mortgage to pay. So if you can't pay your mortgage, the house is gone, and it's going to happen any way or another. If I don't get your rent, I cannot pay the mortgage. So the house is gone no matter what. The sheriff is coming to get it. So it's just a matter of time. So we need to work together so that you can still pay your mortgage. Or there are other options. And I've been in this situation personally where I needed to move. And so I sublease. You can say, hey, I'll help you find someone else to move in. And maybe you can move in with a family member or shelter or whatever you need, because you always have to present yourself as the problem solver. So this doesn't happen again. And this solves a problem for not only you, for your tenant also, because you don't want to be a cruel person saying, oh, you can't pay, you got to get out. No, you want to say, okay, you can't pay. So we need to figure out a long-term solution. We need to get you help that you need, whether it's temporary or ongoing, and then you need to solve that problem.
I had a mentor once tell me that there are short-term and obvious solutions to problems, and there's long-term and not so obvious. And you should always look for the long-term, not so obvious. Mm-hmm. The short-term and obvious that I hear from too many landlords is renter can't pay, not my problem, get the hell out. The long-term and not so obvious of that, Crystal, is the amount of money that you lose shifting from tenant to tenant between the cleaning that you do inside the house, the rehab that you have to do to get it ready for the next tenant, and the price of finding a tenant, and then the risk of that tenant not working out. It is far better to work with your current tenant to find a situation, and having that in your arsenal, Crystal, to your point, where you already know some of the nonprofits out there like Grace, if people want to go back and listen to that episode with Grace, or knowing some ways to find people that can help sublease the property, just having this list of ways that you can help your tenant get through it just to the end of the lease, right. The normal time that you were going to change tenants anyway. You clearly are not a charity and you're not a nonprofit. And while you want to have the heart maybe of a social worker, you have to have the mind of a capitalist, right? But working with somebody to the end of the lease helps you. And I think a lot of landlords that are short-term and obvious don't think about how much that helps you to help your tenant out.
That is true. And even as a renter, when I was still a renter here in expensive DC area, I sought out when it was time for me to rent. I didn't want to go to these big apartment complexes that treat you like you're a number. Yeah. I preferred to rent from a smaller person, one-on-one. And it's just because it's a relationship kind of thing. And, it's not to have excuses or different things like that. It's just to have a relationship. And so, I'm a person, this is a one-on-one, and you learn more from each other.
Yeah. I remember my landlord, the first house I moved into, my landlord was Bob. Bob was just a regular dude. He had this one house. This is the only house he had. And Bob would fix stuff when we need it. But it was funny, Crystal? We were really good to Bob because of the fact that Bob was so good to us. And it was synergistically, it was a great relationship for both of us. I was on the other side of that. When my renter moved out in my rental house, I had a friend who was going through divorce, and I actually broke a bunch of rules that I should tell our deeders not to do. Do not rent to your friends. And I did.
Do not.
Do not rent to your friends, but I did. Number 2 is don't give your friends a special deal. At the end, I did.
Oh.
But I have to say, because I knew this guy so well, and he was a professional painter, he worked in construction, he would actually call me and he'd say, hey, I can't afford to make my full rent payment, but I also noticed that the furnace is having XYZ problem. So I'd come over and I'd look at it and he'd go, no, you don't need to do that. I know how to fix this. If you don't mind, I'll fix it myself. And so we had
a barter.
Yes, it was fantastic. He painted the house for free because he was a professional painter. Yeah. He also did landscaping in the summer. So he landscaped the backyard for me. It was amazing. And then when I wanted to sell the house, I went to him first and I said, hey, I would love to sell this house to you. And he bought it.
Same. I was renting my condo from friends, and at the end, I ended up buying it. So yeah, you never know. You get to learn and you're like, you know what? I think I can do this. I can do this. I've been listening to Stacking Deeds all this time, 20 episodes in, and I can do this. I'm ready. That is funny. Yeah, that's how I got another. What property number was that for me? Was it like 4 or 5? Yep, that's how I acquired one of mine.
That's awesome. You're about to talk to a cool guest. Tell us a little bit about Al.
So Al is a married firefighter, and he was looking to get into real estate. And what do? You read books, you listen to podcasts. So he's been reading books, listening to podcasts, and the time picked him when it was time to go ahead and bite the bullet and jump in. And he's been hooked ever since. So we have Al Hines about to hop in the car, and you're going to learn a lot. But first, I think Doug has some trivia for us.
Hey there, Deeders. I'm Ruth's #1 fan, Neighbor Doug, and it's time for my property pop quiz. But don't worry, you got this. Today, let's talk about buying and selling real estate. You may know that when you sell a property that wasn't your primary residence, you'll be responsible for a capital gain on whatever you earned. But here's why it's important to know the rules. There's a tax technique that allows you to roll your gains from the old property into a new one. Okay, real estate nerds, what's this exchange tax deferral process from one property to another one called? I'll be back right after I check Ruth's oil for the second half of the show. Hey there, Deeders. I'm the guy who keeps the motor on this podcast running, Ruth's Mechanic Doug. Today's question, what's the name of the exchange process that allows you to sell a property and roll the gains into a new one so you'll continue to defer any taxes that are due? The answer? It's called a 1031 exchange. There's lots to know, like time limits and how exactly to claim the deferral, so get yourself some good tax help. But now, let's talk about getting some properties on your own and with a full-time job. Here's Crystal Hammond with our guest, Al Hines.
Ruth, can you pull over? Look at this fancy pants firefighter in a uniform. Let's see if he'll want to chat with us. Hi, Al. So I hear that you are a fireman and you are a rental property investor. So why don't you tell me, first of all, how did you get into real estate investing? What sparked your interest?
Really, it's quite funny. Actually, I got injured on the job, and to be a firefighter, it's very physical. And when I got injured, I was out of work, and I started thinking if something were to happen where I could not be a firefighter or paramedic anymore, then what would I do? And that caused me to kind of think about investing, kind of building for my future and creating multiple streams of income. So I looked into a lot of different investment vehicles through stocks, Roth IRAs, trading, day trading, and I came across real estate. I started reading some books from a few people, and real estate just made sense to me.
Well, yeah. And I think a lot of people, they think, real estate investing is hard or it takes too much money. So what made you think, all right, I'm jumping into this with both feet? Like, how did you do it?
Well, again, it was a lot of research. And then, my wife and I, we made certain financial decisions to kind of prepare ourselves to get involved in real estate. One was to get our credit together, make sure we had the best credit that we could have. And then two, we ended up selling her home and we wanted to move north anyway. And so we took the proceeds and we kind of put some of that to the side and decided that that would be basically our seed money to start buying properties. And she was quite nervous when I came at her with the idea. When we made our first initial down payment on the property, we were both sweating bullets, but it seems to have worked out for us.
Yeah, how'd you find that first property? And then was this one that you were going to live in, or this one would be for investment?
It's funny. I did it in reverse. What we did was we
Mm.
purchased a personal house first, purchased a family home, and then we decided to get into the real estate game. And so we found a realtor that she knew who helped her with her first home. And we actually ended up finding the house ourselves. We stayed on Zillow. We found it on MLS, Zillow, and we found the property. And the realtor walked us through the process of purchasing a rental property as far as having reserves and having the down payment, knowing that it was going to be about 20%. And the good thing is that by us investing into the stock market, we were able to use that as our reserves. So we had the cash to do it, plus we had the reserves to show that we can handle it as first time rental property investors.
Oh, that's cool. So your reserves were actually hanging out in your investment account. So your reserves are actually earning interest, making money for you also instead of just sitting there doing nothing.
Exactly. And that's what people don't realize. They can use retirement accounts, TD Ameritrade accounts, Roth IRA accounts. There's a lot of different accounts that you can use to show that you have reserves.
Aha. Was there a certain amount necessary on reserve, or you did that like you wanted it just for peace of mind?
Well, I wanted it because I was a dividend stock investor. So I wanted to
Got
build it
it.
up as much as I could because that was going to be my path. And obviously, I was going to take the Jack Bogle route and try to invest in the Roth IRAs and let that build and compound over time. That was my
Mhm.
initial thought of investing. And then what we decided, it worked out for us, but what we decided is that real estate makes way more sense. We have way more control and we can see greater returns with real estate. So
Mm.
we were able to pull from those funds to kind of get started. So they typically want you to have about 6 months of reserves on
Oh.
hand. And we had a little bit more than that in our accounts because we just put a little bit in for like the last couple of years. So we had it built up pretty nicely.
So they wanted 6 months of reserves. Like what kind of amount was that? Was that just mortgage, interest, taxes, or some kind of extra for like the vacancy and all
Yeah,
those kind of?
exactly.
Okay.
Vacancies, any type of repairs that might need to be made. I mean, when I spoke to our lender, the rough amount she wanted to see was around that $8,000 to $10,000 mark, and I think we had about 22,000. So,
Okay.
but yeah, that's
And
how she explained it. It was like you said, vacancies, repairs, anything we might run across.
got it. So they actually helped you with that number, or that, yeah, I guess that was their number that they felt comfortable with.
Yeah, that was a number she kind of suggested, and it was like, well, we
Okay.
have that, in our TD Ameritrade account, so that wasn't a barrier to stop us from buying the property. So it just kind of worked out.
Okay. And then so your 20% down plus your 6 to 8 months reserves, that came from selling your previous property? Well,
Exactly. Well,
okay.
yeah. Well, what happened was, again, my wife sold that house,
Mm-hmm.
and we paid off my vehicle, which was a substantial amount at the time. And we had roughly around 10, maybe 15 grand in the bank. And then we put some of that into our personal home because we had to fix
Mm-hmm.
that up a little bit. So we had roughly about 10 grand. And I was just thinking, okay, how can we have our money work for us? It was so nice to receive that check from selling that house. It was
Yes.
like, okay, I'm working this job. She's an educator, so she's working her job. But it was like, how can we build off of what we just gained from selling this house? And at the time, we didn't know it was going to be real estate, but
Uh-huh.
eventually it became real estate. So,
Well, that's another cool thing because from selling that first property, not only did you have enough for a down payment for that next property, you actually had money to fix up the current place that you were
right,
living in or do any upgrades or adding stuff to it. And then that also gave you money to pay off any higher interest
right.
rate debt. So that paid off in so many ways. So tell me about that first investment property that you bought. How did you find your tenants and all that? Like, did you hire all that out, or you decided, you know what, we can do this ourselves?
I decided because, again, I was reading a lot of books, and then I
Okay.
started listening to a lot of podcasts. I mean, it was funny because I came across a few books that had different ideologies on how to approach that. But I wanted to go ahead and manage it myself.
Okay.
I felt like no one cares more about my property or my money than me. And even though I
Nice.
don't know what I'm doing, maybe I can learn along the way and kind of become a good property manager. And it was actually quite easy. At first, I was
Huh.
nervous. It was nerve wracking because I was like, man, we just bought this house. If we don't fill it, then I have to pay this mortgage. How are we going to do that? And it took us a week to find a tenant. And we went through a full screening process. I interviewed tenants, I did background checks, did applications. Tenants had to pay an application fee. And our tenant is still in that same house. It'll be 3 years in August. And we have the same tenant. They pay on time, never had an issue. No nightmares of the whole toilets and trash and 3 o'clock
Right.
in the morning, getting crazy phone
Oh.
calls, nothing like that. So it's been a good experience.
So how did you find tenants? Were you just putting Facebook, marketplace announcements, or did you do newspaper? I know a lot of people don't read the actual newspapers anymore, but were you
Mhm.
putting ads in papers? How did you get the
Pri-
word out?
Primarily Zillow.
Ah,
And then I did the affordablehousing.com, which reaches out to people that are in the voucher program, which receives assistance from the government, which is also awesome. But Zillow was primarily where we found a lot of our tenants.
wow. That is very neat. And that seems like an easy button. So then this first place, then you didn't have a lot of nightmare calls. So you didn't really
No,
have the need for like a whole staff of, I would say, like maintenance people and things like that. So this one goes well. So at what point you and your wife decide, okay, it's time for number two?
early.
Okay. Yay.
Because I think our mortgage on it was $700 at the time. We ended up renting it for $1,400.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah, then we had a nice initial deposit down payment that they paid us. And it was just like the light bulb went off. I would say like a month or two in, it was like, this is amazing. Every first of the month, we know how much money we're making. We're allowing that to stack in our business account.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife would say, I got bit by the real estate bug. It was just like, okay, how can I go buy another property? So I started working overtime hours. I
Uh-huh.
picked up a second job. This is actually during the COVID period. So
Okay.
I was
Wow.
actually able to pick up a second job as a COVID tester. And I was working
Okay.
crazy hours doing that. And we budgeted so that we could purchase the second home. So we definitely watched every nickel that we spent and made
Okay.
sure that we had an investment account. I would say probably about 30%, maybe 40%, maybe even 50% of our income went towards our investment account because that's how much it was important to us. We try to live off of just 50% and then have that other 50% go towards investment. So we were able to purchase our next property, I want to say about 7 months later.
Okay. So this will be your third total property.
Our second property initially
Second.
was 7 months later. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're saying we
You
lived
live
in
in
that.
one.
Yes,
So
that's
this
true.
is
Yeah,
okay. So yeah. So you live in one,
that's
you
true.
have one rental. So your second rental property is
Yes.
now on the horizon. So then how
Right.
did you fund that one?
That one, again, we saved and we saved and we
Saved.
saved. And we had enough for the down payment, which I think was about 20 grand. And we were very
Okay.
aggressive. Like I said, we would cut back on a lot of things that we were doing before, like eating out and
Got
just
it.
wasteful spending. And it
Hmm.
became almost like a game. My wife loves the budget anyway. So she gets excited about that when it comes to saving money. But this time it had a purpose. And so we saved enough and we were able to purchase the second property, which was amazing.
Got it. So you put 20% down on your second investment property.
Yes. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. Well, how did you even find that second property?
Again, we did have a realtor, but I have to give it up to my wife. It was myself and my wife, but we were constantly on MLS. We were constantly on Zillow. We look at it every day. Like even
Oh,
now, we look at it just to kind of see what's out there because it's never a bad time to buy a good deal. And it might be difficult to find them, but if you check every day, you will find them. And that's how we found that property. It was just on the MLS and we found a motivated seller and we were the first to put the offer in on the property and
oh.
we lucked out. Yeah.
Were you looking at certain neighborhoods or did you have a certain price budget in mind?
Yeah, it was more price point opposed to neighborhoods. I think our
Okay.
first property was in an area called East Point. This property was in Atlanta,
Got it.
Southeast. And it was the price. We were comfortable at that price point and paying that down payment. And we enjoyed the layout of the house. You know, it was a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, and I had a full basement that still could be finished. So we thought there was a lot of value in that.
Oh, value and potential, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
that's it. It was a great deal.
And then did that one come with tenants already
It
or?
did not. And that's actually the
Okay,
one that we advertise on the affordablehousing.com website.
got it.
And that one, we did go with a voucher participant. So it's called the Atlanta Housing Authority.
Okay.
And we did find our tenant from there, but we screened our tenants. It was the same process. Throughout this process, we try to build systems and kind of
Yes.
stick to those systems to ensure that what we did was successful the first time. So why change it the second time?
True. If it ain't broke,
So
don't fix
we went
it.
through the same process, same criteria as far as what we were looking for. And we were able to find a really great tenant who, again, she's still there now and is very happy with the property.
Oh, that's cool. So, in your criteria, if you're looking for tenants, would you say income is more important, or like what were your main green flags instead of red flags?
Yeah, obviously you want to see, at least 3 times the rental amount. I like to see a good credit score. And when I say a good credit score, at least in the sixes, I think
Okay.
anything below that would be a red flag for me. And then more importantly, I like to know what went on in your last property as far as
Mhm.
kind of how you took care of it. So what I do is I do kind of pop-ups for the people that I interview, and
Okay.
they allow me to come by and I visit them at their residency, and I'm able to kind of see how they live. And they don't really know when I'm coming. That's part of the
Ah,
agreement.
that's
Uh,
smart.
yeah, but that way you can kind of get a feel for, how people really live and how they're going to take care of your property and kind of who they really are. And I tell you what, the hardest part is telling somebody no. There's a
Mm,
lot of great people that I would love to rent to, but unfortunately you can only select one person. And that's
right.
probably the hardest part, is saying no.
Huh. I know a lot of people have a fear of some housing authority clients because they do have a bad rap,
Yeah,
but
they
you'd
do.
say just screen just like you would normally
Yeah,
screen.
I mean, and that's honestly, I love it when people say that, because that means I have more of a selection of people to choose from. To be honest, I love voucher participants. I mean, you have to go through the same screening process, because I've had cash payers, regular tenants, and they've torn my property up. They've
Yeah.
not paid the rent on time. I mean, when you partner with the government, you're getting that rent every month. I never
Mhm.
had an issue when COVID happened, and she's actually been my best tenant.
Wow.
She'll call me if there's anything going on. And a lot of times she'll try to fix it herself. I tell her not to
That's
do
cool.
that. I tell her I'll take care of it, but she goes above and beyond because she's more appreciative of the opportunity to make that her home. And so I think you get more appreciation from voucher
Mhm.
participants than
Okay.
other renters.
Oh, that is really cool. So for this second one, did you have she mostly fixes everything herself? Like how involved is the housing authority on stuff like
They,
that?
they do inspections on the property. So
Okay.
they come out typically twice a year, which is great
Mm,
because I'm able to take care of stuff if I have to. I've never had an issue to where
okay.
we didn't pass, because what I'll do is they'll send me an email about a month in advance, and then I'll send my handyman out there to kind of take a look at things and make sure everything's in order and good to go. And we've never had an issue. And again, that just makes sure the property is being well maintained. That makes sure that I'm doing my job on my end as a landlord, because it is my duty to provide a safe environment for my tenants.
Hmm.
So I have no issues with the inspections. I love it.
Oh, that's good. Well, how did you find your handyman?
You know, now that is a trick, because you can go through a
Yeah.
lot of different contractors and handyman, and they're
Oh,
different,
yes.
you know. So I went through a few, but I lucked up because a guy I was working for when I was doing the COVID testing,
Hmm.
he owned rental properties. And he had
Oh.
one handyman that he swore by that he used, and
Hmm.
I just kind of inherited him.
Wow, that's
He
awesome.
referred me, and he's been great. I mean, I can call him right now and he'll go to my property within the next hour or two and
Oh,
take care of an issue. So he's been a godsend for sure. But it took me probably about 3 or 4 people to
okay.
go through before I found him. But it's been good. It's been real good.
Well, that's good and that's comforting too, because it's not only the referral process, but first and foremost, you're sharing with others, what you're doing and, your goals and things like that. Because when you're chatting and you're telling people, hey, I'm a real estate investor,
Mhm.
you get to chatting about stuff and issues that you may have. And hey, here are some referrals. This is the mortgage person I use, or
Yeah.
here's a great
Yeah.
handyman. So I guess, yeah, it is very important to get what you're working on and what you're doing, get the word out so people know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your network is very important. I think it's important to surround yourself with like minded individuals who are
True.
kind of in that realm. And then you kind of can feed off of each other. And if there's issues, then, you might have a solution that they might need, or they
Right.
might have a solution that you need. So you do that through conversation.
That is true. So is that it? So right now, do you have 2 investment properties or you have more?
No, I have more.
Yes. I
It's
love
funny, even
this.
since I talked to Alan, we purchased more. So what happened was
Awesome.
this. Let me explain it to you.
Okay.
The house that we had in Dallas, since we bought our second property, and this is a time we did forced appreciation on this house before I even knew what that was.
Right. What does that mean? Break
Because
that
when
down.
you go into a property, it has old floors, messed up paint, you might want to expand a room here and there or kind of redo a bathroom. So that's what we did to this property because it hadn't been
Okay.
touched since 1999. And so we had to do like a complete bathroom remodel. We switched
Okay.
out the floors from
Mm.
carpet to hardwood floors throughout the home, fresh paint throughout the home. So we did a lot of upgrades of appliances, had to upgrade the furnace. And initially, we
Okay.
spent a lot of money. I didn't know at the time, but that's called forced appreciation. You're putting money
Okay.
into the property. And even though we had this appreciation boom naturally, we were able to really increase the value of our property. So what happened was we purchased our second rental property. And then again, like I told you, I got bit by the real estate bug. So I mentioned to
Yes.
my wife, I said, hey, listen, we've only been in this house for 2 years, but we could sell it for this. And then maybe what we could do is take the money, go rent a property, and then buy another rental property.
Mm-hmm.
What my wife says to me, no, what we can do is we could sell this house, take the money, then go buy our next rental property and live in it. Instead of renting
Oh.
somewhere, let's just live in the next property that we're eventually going to rent out. And I thought it was ingenious. It's a version of house hacking. This is
Mm-hmm.
before I even knew what house hacking was. So we'll
Aha.
get to that point. But so we went ahead and sold our house. We found another home, which was a total rehab property in the heart of a place called Jefferson Park, which is
Okay.
probably a B class neighborhood in Atlanta or East Point, Georgia. It's a very nice neighborhood, very historical, a lot of beautiful buildings. And we found an old home built in 1944 where we had to switch out the
Classic.
plumbing, the electrical. We had to tear down walls. We had to do a whole
Oh.
new kitchen,
Oh.
bathroom. I mean, it was a new roof. It was a complete rehab project. And we lived in a hotel for about a month and a half.
Oh, wow. So that's like you were on HGTV status at that point.
It felt like it. It felt like we were doing HDTV except without the commercials. It's a lot harder in real life than it is
Right.
on HGTV. But it was a complete remodel, and we ended up buying that property. I think we got it for 154, which was the final price, 5% down. So we were only in at 14 grand. Remodel was
Mhm.
around 50 grand. But what happened was we lived in that property for a year, and then we did a cash out refinance.
Okay. So wait,
So
let's back up to how you bought it.
okay.
So you only needed 5% down because you were going to live in it.
Right. We got a conventional loan. Yep.
Right, conventional. And so then it took about 50,000 to fix. So was this your reserves money? Where did this money come from?
Well, it came from the sale of our house. It
Ah,
came because
got
we
it.
sold our house. We walked away with a nice chunk of change. And
Beautiful.
so we bought the home and then we put that money into the home to fix up the next home.
Got it. All right. So you live in it for about a year, and that's cool too because you get to customize it to how you liked it. Okay, so you bought it for about 154K.
Right.
Was that a good deal because it needed all of the work?
Yeah, well, it was a great deal because it did need all the work, but the area, the location
Mhm.
is what we purchased. It was 5 minutes from the airport. Again, it's in a nice area known as Jefferson Park. I call it B class just because the outside area is still kind of rough, but within that
Okay.
little community, it's just beautiful. You can call it A class. But we
Nice.
bought the location, because we
Okay.
knew that the properties in that location would appreciate. And so what happened was, again, we purchased it, waited the year, and then we did a cash out refinance, and we found that on a new appraisal, it actually appraised for $325,000.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So you're in for the property Let's see. So it costs 154,000. You only put 5% down because you're living in it, and then you put
Right.
an additional 50 in.
Right.
So that's a little over 200,000, and it
Right.
appraised for
$325,000.
wow. That's awesome.
Yes. And so the story doesn't end there. Because
That's
again,
great news.
I'm bit by the real estate. But what we did was, since we were going to rent that property out, we did a cash out refinance. And then we went and pulled that money out and went and bought a rental property.
Okay, so it appraised for 325,000. So
Right.
you got a new loan for the 325, or
Right. I took out cash. So I did a
Got it.
cash out. So the loan amount, I want to say I took out 50 or 60,000,
okay.
somewhere around there. Yeah, we took that out. And actually, I might be moving too fast, but what we had planned to do, this is around the time that I found out about house hacking.
Okay.
And so are you familiar with house hacking?
Oh yeah, my first place it was a duplex. So I lived
Okay.
in one unit, and then the other tenant paid the bulk of the mortgage.
Which is wonderful, which I wish I would have known that when we sold our house the first time, because that's
Got it.
probably what we would have done. But what we did was before we did the cash out refi, because we were going to be, it was a conventional loan, we still were able to use an FHA loan.
Got it.
So we purchased a triplex
A triplex.
with an FHA loan. Yeah. Yeah, let me back up a little bit. We purchased that before we actually did the cash out refi. So when the year
Got
came
it.
up,
Oh,
we ended up buying the triplex. And our plan was to live in the one unit and then rent out the other two units. And we were able to do that because we could still take advantage of our FHA loan. Because again,
Mhm.
when we purchased that house, it was with a conventional loan. So
oh,
I
right.
still had access to an FHA loan. And we had just write a letter to the lender saying that, hey, the size of town are totally different. East Point is roughly, 40 miles from where we live now. And so
Mhm.
we moved here because, better school systems. And we just had to write a letter explaining that why we were leaving within a year or a year's time.
Okay.
And we got it approved. So we bought the triplex with the plan to live in the triplex. And then that's when we had to switch that conventional loan out. So I did the cash out refi.
Mhm.
And then we went and bought another duplex down in Macon, Georgia.
Oh, nice. So you bought the triplex and you move in?
Yes.
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 Right.
Yes. I moved
And
into the
then-
triplex. It was only 3.5% down because again, it's our
Perfect.
primary on an FHA
Right.
loan. It came with tenants in place. And I even
Nice.
found that property because I knew it was undervalued. I went to a site called rentalmeter.com.
Yep.
And you can kind of check rental rates. And where the property is located is close to like a downtown square. There's a lot of development going on. And so
Mhm.
I knew the rents were very low. So I knew we would be able to raise the rents eventually to market value. So it was a good buy. And then we got a very, very nice appraisal on that property when we purchased it in our favor.
Okay.
And so, again, we only had to put down 3.5%. And then we moved into the one unit. And
Nice.
that's kind of where we are today.
So with your cash out refinance, you bought a duplex.
Right. We bought a duplex down in Macon, Georgia,
Uh-huh.
because the prices of Atlanta started to explode a little bit. Again, you can still find good deals. I'm a firm believer in that. But I wanted to kind of venture out a little bit, and I wanted to kind of see in the surrounding areas. And we found a really good deal on a duplex down in Macon, Georgia, which became our next property.
Nice. Since that was investment, that was 20%
20%
down.
down. Yeah.
Perfect.
And
But you had the money coming out from the previous property.
we had the money coming out from our previous property that we did the cash out refinance on. We just pulled that money, that 50, 55, 60,000, something like that. We pulled that out and we put that into the duplex. And not all of it, but that's how we were able to
Right.
purchase it.
What
Yeah.
you needed to.
Yeah.
And then did that come with tenants also?
Yes, that has
Oh.
changed. Actually, we lost a couple of those tenants. That's kind of the gift and the curse when you inherit tenants because you don't have your own vetting process in place. You
True,
kind of have to
true.
take them on. So unfortunately, that was the first time I didn't actually have to file an eviction. I kind of
Ah.
talked to the tenant and kind of explained
Okay.
to her she probably needs to move on, but she did it peacefully and there were no issues. And so everything worked out. And I was able to put a nice tenant in there that kind of
Good.
met my standards, met my criteria. And she's in there. And then the other side, we literally just rented out. The other tenant's lease came up. So I just found another tenant for that other side. And both times I was able to increase the rent because
Nice.
again, They were a little bit below market value, so I just bumped it up a little bit. So I haven't had any issues with that
Okay.
property.
So how many are you managing now? So are you self-managing all of them?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. I look at it like until it becomes too chaotic to where it's out of my span of control, at that point I'll get a
Yeah.
property manager. But right now I enjoy it. I enjoy meeting the tenants. I enjoy dealing with issues. I have handymen in place who I know I can call to fix whatever that might need to be fixed. And honestly, I don't get a lot of calls for that because a lot of our properties that we buy, we make sure we get them rent ready and we make sure we take care of a lot of problems going in. And in that way, they don't hit us on the back end.
Got it. So how many total units is that? It's like what, 6?
10.
5? Wow.
Yeah,
Congrats.
I'm at 10.
Total. So you're self-managing 10 and you're still firefighting?
Yes, I am. But I'm not working overtime anymore.
Right.
I don't do
Okay.
that.
Yeah. You don't need to.
Yeah, I
So
don't work a second job. I don't do that anymore. I just do my regular 24-hour shift and then a real estate investor.
Great. So this duplex, what year did you get that last duplex?
This was last year. Yeah, I got the last duplex. I think we closed July of last year. So
Okay.
July.
Where were interest rates back then? Were they starting to go up?
They were starting to go up. I want to say, because when I did my cash out refi was last year, I think it was May or June. I did a cash out refi. My interest rate at the time on that property I was living in went from a 2.8 to a 5.7.
Okay.
And I want to say in July, I got a 6.1% interest rate on that duplex.
Not bad. So let's talk about the math, because I know a lot of people, they're sitting on the sidelines. They're like, oh, no, I can't do anything. Interest rates just went up. But it's like,
Silly talk.
don't do that. Like, you're passing up great deals and opportunities.
Exactly. And what people have to realize is that interest rates are not going to stay high forever. So when they come down, you just refinance, I mean, at the end of the day, a good deal is a good deal. So even at 6% on that duplex, I think we got it for 152.
Wow.
And then we put down obviously the 20% on that one. So the loan amount, I think is around 112, something like that. But my mortgage on that duplex is only $796.
Wow, $796.
Yeah, and that's
mortgage.
PI, TI, that's everything included.
Insurance, taxes, and then how much are you collecting?
One side I charge $1,020, then the other side is $1,050.
Oh, wow.
So,
See, that's awesome. So imagine if Al would have just said, no, interest rates are too high. I don't want to collect, what is this, an extra like $1,200, $1,300 per month.
exactly.
Because interest rates are high. So let's talk about the maintenance piece.
Sure.
Because I feel like a lot of people, okay, so their 3 fears are like, okay, I don't know where I'm going to get money to start. And there you go. You worked and saved for the first one, but you have 2 options. It's either you're going to live in it for the 3.5% down, or you're going to go investment with 20% down. So
exactly.
we talked about all the many ways to get the money. And then tenants, you talked about, okay, you have your screening process, or you get help from the housing authority and Zillow. There are a lot of places to find tenants. So let's talk about the maintenance part. I think that's one of the third ways. Like, I don't want the phone calls, and some people, they hire that out. But how far away are all of your properties, would you say?
They're not too far. I mean, I would say there's some that are roughly 40 miles, 45 miles away. But again, it's not like I necessarily have to be there.
Right.
In those locations. For example, down in Macon, Georgia, I have a handyman down there who I can call when issues arise, and he'll go over there and take care of it for me. And the way I look at it is the property manager is going to do the same thing. They're probably not going to be the one fixing the issue. They're just going to hire it out to somebody else. So why not I do it? I think that's a fear people have as far as getting the phone calls at 2:00 in the morning. That has never happened to me.
Awesome.
I mean, I can literally count on one hand how many times my tenants have called me with a major issue in the last 3 years. It just doesn't happen that way. And then you have certain systems that you can have in place. Like, for example, there's a software out there to where you can have your tenant sign up on that software, and they can put their maintenance request on the software where you get it via email. And so you can respond that way. You can even have their lease agreements up on that site. You can know when they pay. My wife kind of manages all that.
Oh, cool.
She takes care of the administrative aspect of the business, and I deal with more of the operations.
Got it. So the admin is all taken care of by a website pretty much, and you're just checking that. That's easy buttonable. So What's next is my next question. So you have 10
Well,
units. Are you going
yes.
to just coast at 10 for a while or?
No, 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 absolutely not. And actually, what made 10 was last year when we bought that duplex.
Uh-huh.
What happened was I went and got a personal loan through my bank, and I used that money to go buy a house for cash. So I bought my first cash
Oh.
property. It was a single family home down in Macon, Georgia. And I renovated that into, or rehabbed that into a duplex. So I took it from a single family and I turned it into a 2-unit. So that's funny because that's my first Burr project, which I had
Yeah.
no idea what I was doing. And let's just say it's still going on. It's moving in the right direction, but the
Okay.
project is not completely. I think I bought that house in August, started the project in November. I thought it was only going to take 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say it hasn't taken 3 months. It's been a little bit longer than 3 months, but we budgeted correctly for it.
Perfect.
We should be finishing that project by next month. And so once we do that, we'll do the cash out refinance. We'll rent it out first, obviously. Then we'll refinance it. We'll pull out that capital and then we'll put that towards purchasing other properties. So I did that and I bought at the same time, which I don't advise new investors to do. I also bought a fix and flip property.
Oh.
So I had 2 projects going on at the same, and I've never done a fix and flip. This is my first time doing that. And so that's supposed to close next month as well. So let's just say I took on a lot, but I learned a lot.
Yes.
My wife's behind me 110%, which is wonderful. And I don't see us stopping. Right now, we're in the triplex. After next month, we're going to be looking for a house to purchase just for us, a family home.
Got it.
And then after that, I'll get back into looking for good deals.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you clearly like it because you still have all your hair, like you haven't pulled your hair out and things like that. And it looks like
Yeah, I don't like it. I love it. I mean, I just think
awesome.
I just think, for me, it's not even about the finances or obviously, fire movement, but it is about being able to own my time one day, and eventually take care of my kids when I'm not here or to leave them with assets. So I enjoy collecting assets, things that pay me money every month. And, I don't like liabilities,
Right.
So
That makes sense.
yeah.
Well, this was great talking to you. It looks like we've pulled up to our stop. Ruth just randomly just throws us out of the car when she's tired of listening to our yapping. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on the Twitter streets. You can reach me at Alex, the HHIG CEO.
Okay, so Alex, THE. HHIG.
CEO.
There
and
we
on
go.
Twitter. And then my website is hhigllc.com.
Perfect.
And that's where you can find me.
LLC.com. Well, thanks for joining us today. I hang out in the Twitter streets too.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I'll
see you
follow
online.
you. Yeah. Thank you, Crystal.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, what a great guy, Crystal.
Definitely. See, and his wife, they have a great team. So his wife is Miss Admin, so she takes care of all the tools, the online tools that he talked about. And just like we were saying earlier about the tools, so they were using Zillow, like everybody's familiar with Zillow and MLS.com to find properties. They were just searching every day. And then
a great question, just to pause there for a second, a great question to ask yourself is, how did you come to this conclusion? Did I come to it just, it's a gut feeling? Or do I have some data behind this decision? Too often, I think we just trust the gut decision. We don't want to do that. And to Al's point, he's got data points that help him compete with the big boys and girls.
Exactly.
I do feel like there's kind of a graduation, right? People start with things like house hacking, then they go to single family, then they go to multi-unit. And it feels like that's a confidence thing, isn't it? Like you get confident enough, you're like, okay, I can peel off now a duplex or a quadplex or whatever it might be. Coming up next, normally this is where the phone rings, Crystal. That's right. But we actually,
Rotary, Triple R.
We have a letter today from someone. If you want to, by the way, ring Ruth's Rotary, which is far better radio than me trying to read this. Oh, people can hear that. The letter. How do people do it?
We go to stackingdeeds.net/voicemail.
Yes, but today Well, we got a professional here. Doug, read this for us.
Today's question comes from listener Elton. Elton says, "Hey, we both love the show." Not Elton and I, probably Elton and his partner. Anyway, we both love the show. We already learned so much from listening to you and the guests of the show. My wife and I recently decided to move out of state. Technically, I had to move for a new opportunity. During this move, we decided to keep our house in Michigan and convert it to an Airbnb, the first step of many to come into real estate. We both have a question. Should we create a business and move the property under the business name, or should we continue listing the property under our name? Thank you, Elton. Great question, Elton.
Thanks for the question, Elton, and thanks for listening, and congrats on the new move. So this one for me, similar situation. When I had to move, I converted my live-in into a rental, and it was easy for me just to keep it in my name, and just because you still have to file the taxes the same way you would if the property wasn't an LLC or a business name, or if it's yours personally. When you fill out that part of the rental real estate, that is where you will see all the information that you fill out. But I have not done this personally. I've kept everything in my name, and it's all worked out as far as for tax reasons. So I would definitely say talk to your tax person about this. And if you don't have a good tax person, get a good tax person, because you could be missing out on a lot of great deductions, and they will know for your situation, because maybe you're above a certain income where you can have certain write-offs, or maybe you're below, so you want to make sure you're doing the perfect thing.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people will tell you that you should set up an LLC because of the fact that you may get sued. The issue with that, Crystal, is if you're going to get sued, they're going to go right through your LLC and sue you personally anyway. So the lawsuit for me, and by the way, I love your disclaimer here. We're not your legal reps. We're not your tax people. So take what we say with a grain of salt and then go consult the right people. But they're going to go right through that anyway. So Crystal, to your point, that's not a great reason to have the LLC. However, what I like from the tax point of view, what you get from that tax point of view is it makes it real easy if you do get audited. It makes it very easy for you to show everything that is in the LLC was an expense for the business. All the expenses that you had personally are not, because they're going to ask you to explain, how is this a business expense? How is this a business expense? And if you can show a clear delineation of church and state, that's a good reason to have an LLC. Plus, if your tenants are writing checks and they're writing checks to you personally, they may think that you're somebody that can be messed with. But if you're somebody that has to write a check to, big business LLC, give it a nice shiny name, you may then come across as an organization that has a little bit more oomph, a little bit more clout. So for people that are afraid that they might get messed with, that might be a reason. But Crystal, also to your point, there's cost to all that stuff. And if you have a single property, if you have one renter, if you're not going to have a lot of properties, the cost versus benefit, not as big as a lot of people make it seem that it is. So I really like your advice about checking with your specific financial advisors and tax people.
Agreed. And plus, I'm single, so what works for a single person will not transfer over to a married couple, vice versa, any other situation. So always, 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 just like I don't ask single people for advice. I'm trying to get married.
You don't get dating advice, maybe real estate advice, not dating advice.
So definitely.
Yes.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. No dating advice. So take that real estate advice for someone that would know how to handle your specific situation.
If you've got a question for Crystal and I to answer, as Crystal mentioned earlier, go to stackingdeeds.net/voicemail. Leave us a message and we'll answer your question just like we did Elton's today. Congratulations on the move, Elton. And fun with the Airbnb.
Yeah, good luck. Go back and listen to our episode with Lauren.
Or even our last episode where we talked about the problems people are having right now with Airbnbs.
Oh, yes.
Come join Crystal and I both in the Stacking Benjamin's basement. We will see you next week here again on the Stacking Deeds Show.
Doug, what should we have learned today?
should we have learned today? First, take some advice from Al Hines. While a property manager can make life easy, if you want big profits, you can design your life in a way that you can take care of your own properties without help and with a full-time job. Second, take some advice from Crystal and Joe in our headline. If your tenant needs help, work to help them find programs, find subletters, and be a good tenant. But when it's time for a new one, use tech tools to price your new lease at current rates to keep up with current trends. But the big lesson? Well, the trend here in Ruth's car is more smoke. Ruth, I thought the Canadian wildfires were bad. You really gotta quit. It's better for you and and for Crystal and Joe and me. Really, just pull over, lady. Thanks to Al Hines for joining us today. You can find out more about Al at his website, hhigllc.com, or at Alex the HHIG CEO on Twitter. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingdeeds.net.